In the season of Easter, we're focusing on the word hope, walking through 1 Peter, looking at that word. And I have to admit to you today that hope is not my favorite word. It seems a little flimsy, kind of plastic, kind of fluffy, but not with any real meaning. It can be synonymous with wishful thinking. So, like, I hope the Cardinals win the World Series, or I hope there's ice cream in the freezer, or whatever. It just seems kind of like wishful thinking. And so it's not my favorite word, and I don't feel like preaching about it today. Two things. Two reasons why I will. First of all, I'm up here, so I've got to say something. Second, Peter gives some substance to the word hope that I think makes me maybe just want to start preaching about it. So we're going to look at Peter today. Peter doesn't talk about hope like a Hallmark card, kind of like words but no real substance. When you've seen miracles like Peter did, then you can talk about hope. Then you have a right to talk about hope. When you have denied your friend 3 times and then that friend still forgives you, then you can talk about hope. When you have seen your friend tragically die, and then you've seen him alive again after he died, then you could talk about hope. You have a right to say something. So we're going to listen to Peter today. And I want to share with you what he has to say about hope, the substance that he gives to the word, and in particular, how he ties it to action. It's not just a sentiment, but hope is an action. So we're going to dive into Peter. We're going to start with verse 13, and I'd like you to read it with me. Therefore, preparing your minds for action, set your hope fully on the grace that will be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ. I want you to find the word action. It's kind of near the beginning in the second line. Then a few words later, I want you to find the word hope. And this is exactly what Peter does in this particular text. He's tying hope, that hope finds its way out in action, that these two words are linked together, that your hope isn't just a fuzzy feeling, but that it's connected to action. I want you to look at that phrase, preparing your minds for action. Now, I'm going to just let you in on a little secret. The original Greek does not say that. The translators kind of smoothed it over and made it really nice and pretty. The literal phrase under preparing your minds for action is girding up your loins, the loins of your mind. Let me say that again. It's kind of confusing. Girding up the loins of your mind. Okay, can you see why they kind of smoothed it over with like a few different words? Girding up the loins. That sounds obscene, doesn't it? You're like, Pastor Jeff, stop saying that. But it's important because there's something underneath it. So preparing your minds for action. The real words underneath, girding up the loins of your mind. So girding the loins is kind of an old ancient saying. It's a figure of speech that's kind of hard to understand if you've never worn a dress. But I kind of get it just a little bit wearing a robe, that if you're going to go up steps or if you're going to kind of be in a hurry, you maybe pick it up just a little bit. If you're on the floor with the kids for the children's message, I kind of have to rearrange the robe. Well, in ancient times, the tunic was the standard wardrobe. That was a fine piece of fashion, except if you had to do hard work or run, it kind of made it difficult. So to gird up your loins meant to take the tunic and to pull it up. I'm wearing pants underneath, don't worry. And then to tie it around your waist. And that's what it meant to gird up your loins. And you would do that for battle or to get ready to run or to get ready to work hard or do a difficult task. And so, this is the last time I'm going to say it, girding up your loins meant to prepare for hard work, to get ready for a difficult task. Maybe a better phrase for us is roll up your sleeves. You're going to get after it. So you roll up your sleeves and you're ready to go. So, That's what this means, preparing your minds for action, getting ready to go, rolling up your sleeves, getting ready to be active, sober-minded, set your hope fully. And so, Peter ties hope to action, to rolling up your sleeves. Get ready to go. So in this short text today, just chapter 1, verses 13 to 25, Peter refers to action that's inspired by a real hope in Jesus Christ. And I'm just going to point out 3 hopeful actions that Peter lifts up just in these few verses. So he ties hope to action, then he lifts up kind of hints at some things that are hopeful actions. So I'm going to lift up 3 hopeful actions. The first is this. It is a hopeful action to remove distractions. So you see I'm talking about the mind here. Prepare your mind for action. Be sober-minded. Anybody here know what minnow races are? Anybody? No. Wow. I've struck out at every service. Nobody knows what minnow races are. So you have a gutter. Let's say you take 2 gutters. You cap them at the end. You fill them with water, and you lay them side by side. And then at one end, you drop a minnow in each gutter, and they race. Thus, it's called minnow races. Okay, now do you see it? You see it in your mind? And you race the minnows, and you cheer. You pick one, and you decide who's going to get to the end first. Now, imagine minnows racing, okay? They have ADD. So they're going to dart all over the place. One might go down partway and then go back to the start line again. And so it's kind of maddening, but it's a lot of fun. And so the minnow races, you just have these minnows trying to get to the other end and darting all over the place. Does your life ever feel like a minnow race? Does your mind ever feel like a minnow mind? Just darting all over the place. No real focus, but just kind of going here and there. When you have a hope that's compelling and it's out front and you're looking toward it, you have to be fixated on it and not darting here and there. So Peter says, prepare your mind for action. Be sober-minded, clear and focused in mind. Set distractions aside and set your mind on what matters most. We're easily distracted by media and scrolling and screens. We're easily distracted by substances. Sometimes you eat too much or you drink too much. We're distracted by people, voices in our ear that we really don't need to be listening to, but they distract us, and we get a minnow mind. But because you have a living hope, you're called to be sober-minded. Clear and focused, single-minded in your focus. So at night, around 8 or 9 o'clock, shut off your phone or put it on Do Not Disturb and start to shut down. Open and close your day in prayer, not with a screen. Turn off the TV and go for a walk. Stop trying to do a lot of things poorly and instead do a few things well. Because we have a hope ahead of us, it requires focus. And it's a hopeful action to be focused, to be present, to be attentive, to be available, to be prayerful. Setting aside distractions and being clear-minded is a hopeful action. Another hopeful action in this short text is to do what lasts. So Peter talks a lot about perishable and imperishable things, even just these few verses. He also quotes the prophet Isaiah in talking about grass. It grows up really quick, and then it dies, and it withers and blows away in the wind. So he's drawing a contrast between things that last and things that don't last. There are things that stand the test, and there are things that come and go easily. And how much of our life is focused on temporary things, on silver and gold, on perishable things. Perishable, like the leftovers that are in the fridge a little too long and start growing things that are green and pink. That's perishable. Peter says there are things that are imperishable. You've been born again to something, a hope that's imperishable. It's not going to rot. And so do things that last. Focus on the things that endure. I have a friend who has a chronic migraine headache. For the last 9 months, he has had a constant headache the whole time. Now, sometimes it spikes and it's like unbearable, debilitating. And then sometimes it's manageable and it's low level. But it's always there. And so he's had to rearrange his life because he can't do everything that he used to do. He's got to budget his time, and he's got to work only certain hours. He's got to have time to kind of take a nap in a dark space to kind of recover. And so he's rearranged his whole life around it. So I asked him last week, how are you doing? He says, not well. But he said, suffering has taught me to focus on what matters most. Maybe you've experienced that, where there's a suffering, something that plagues you, and it narrows your focus on what matters most. And he said, I can't do everything that I used to do, so I have to be really focused on doing the most important things. I have to be really focused on doing the most important things. Do the most important things. There's no time for things that don't last. Silver and gold, status, looks. That stuff comes and goes, and you don't have a lot of time for that. We pray the Lord's Prayer, God, I want to be about your kingdom and your will. So those things last, your kingdom and your will. So God, show me your kingdom and your will. I want to be about those things. Show me how I participate in your kingdom and your will, because that will last. I want my vocations, my callings, to center on those things that endure, the imperishable. So God, show me your kingdom and your will. That's a hopeful action, because it's hoping in the most important, and it's focused on that. Do what lasts. Focus on the imperishable. A final hopeful action comes in verse 22, where Peter says, love one another earnestly from a pure heart. Love one another earnestly. Remember that gird your loins. I said it one more time, sorry. Remember that means to get ready for a difficult task. To get ready to run, to roll up your sleeves. And when Peter says to love one another, Jesus said that too, and you know that, okay, love one another, I get it. But that word earnestly is like an exclamation point. It means, no, really, to love one another earnestly is hard work. You got to roll up your sleeves. You're going to get a little bit dirty doing that. Some of you have people in your life that are really hard to love right now. I know. Some of you have someone in your life that's so hard to love, they may be even in your family, or a spouse, or a close friend. That person might be in this room right now, someone who's hard to love. Okay, I see a lot of husbands and wives looking at each other. I get it's okay. This is from God, okay? If he's convicting you, it's from him. I'm just going to get out of the way. Love earnestly means that it's hard work. Now you might say, well, Pastor Jeff, I know we're supposed to love, but they've offended me. I know, but they've been rude to me. They've said some things to me. I know, Pastor Jeff, but they haven't said I'm sorry yet. Or maybe I will when they get their act together. Or they've been avoiding me. You know, Jesus went to the cross. It was an act of earnest love to die for our worst sins, right? You know that. Can you imagine Jesus on the cross saying, Why am I here? They haven't said I'm sorry yet. Why? I'm not going to do this unless they get their act together. Oh, they've offended me. Oh, they're being rude to me right now. What am I doing up here? Can you imagine Jesus saying that? No. Because he rolled up his sleeves and he loved earnestly, even if it required that he would take the hit and he would have to sacrifice and he'd have to take the blame. Now, you are not Jesus, but Peter's calling you to love in the same way, to love earnestly, to roll up your sleeves. Okay, I know this is hard, but it's an important word that you need to hear today. Living hope means that there's no more time for anger and getting even. There's no more time for being passive-aggressive and avoiding someone that needs your love. You need to stop it. Today is the day that you need to call them, talk. It's time to roll up your sleeves. It's time to be gracious. It's time to humble yourself. It's time to forgive. And it's time to love someone, even if that means that you're going to suffer for it. And you probably will. If you're really going to love someone earnestly, you're probably going to suffer for it. But if you do, you're in good company. Jesus has gone before you. He's done that. You know what it looks like. He'll give you the strength to do it too. But loving earnestly is a hopeful action. It means you have a hope beyond yourself. You can only do it because you have a hope in a living Lord. That's the only way you can do it. On Easter, we talked about mazes, if you were with us. We talked about how if you're doing a maze and you get stuck in the middle, a little trick is to go to the end, to start with the end. That can help you work backwards and get through the middle. Although with this particular maze, I don't know if it helps where you start. You're going to get stuck in the middle somewhere. And sometimes life feels like this, that you are stuck in the middle, that you're turned around, you don't know which way to go. And it's easy to be discouraged, and it's hard to have hope. And sometimes hope seems impossible. God, there's no way. There's no way, God. But when you're stuck in the middle, remember, begin with the end. You know the end. Peter is quick to remind us of the end. You know the end. A living Lord, a future prepared for you, an inheritance imperishable. And when you have this indescribable hope, it helps you to roll up your sleeves in the middle because you know the end. So Peter reminds us of the end again and again, and I want to remind you too. In verse 13, if you'd read this with me. Set your hope fully on the grace that will be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ. There's an end coming. He will be revealed fully, finally, once and for all. That's coming. It's really coming. So you can roll up your sleeves right now in the middle because you know there's an end. If you'd read with me, this is verse 4 of chapter 1. Read with me. He has caused us to be born again to a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, to an inheritance that is imperishable, undefiled, unfading. You have an inheritance, and it's not in a will, and it's not in a safe somewhere. You have an inheritance that's imperishable, that won't rot. Jesus has prepared it for you, the living Lord. He died, and he's alive at this moment, and that's your template too. That's your end. So you can roll up your sleeves right now. Verses 18 and 19. If you'd read with me. Know that you were ransomed from the futile ways inherited from your forefathers, not with perishable things, such as silver or gold, but with the precious blood of Christ. False hope is not real because it has no action. It's just a dream. It's just a Hallmark card if there's no action with it. Real hope has action. The ancients used to say, gird your loins. So Jesus rolled up his sleeves. And he loved earnestly. He put on his work boots. He got his hands dirty, dirt under his fingernails, a split lip, scars on his wrists. It was action. It was real. It is real. Came to die for you and then to rise from the dead. He who is at this moment the living Lord, he gives you a living hope, and that changes everything. It can change how you live presently in this moment so that we have a real hope in a real end. And in the end, all things will be made new. All things. All of the bruised and battered things that you're bumping against right now, they will be made new in the end. In the end, you will need no light, nor lamp, nor sun. Christ himself will be your light. In the end, night will be no more. No more terror or fear, suffering or crying. In the end, there's a king who rules and reigns over everything, and a feast at his table that you get to be invited to in the end. And you get to sit at that table in a reunion with laughter and joy. You know the end. You have an indescribable hope, a hope that compels you to action. Now is the time for hopeful action. It's time to roll up your sleeves. Amen.